Now, everybody, thank you all for joining. Hey, Matt, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good. We're, as you saw in the interview questions, this should be a fun, lightweight conversation, as if you're talking to me, but also to the students who are in our program. And to give you just some basis around our program again, there's students who will watch this who are in our summer program right now, but also students who may be watching this who are going to be in classrooms across the Bay Area in California to learn about Sway Innovation and what you have going on.
Great.
So excited to be interviewing you. And to kick it off just hot, what does Sway Innovation do? What the heck are you guys up to over there?
Sure. Well, thanks, Derek, and thanks to those who are joining us live. I can't see you. I assume you're there. My name is Matt Mays. I'm one of the co-founders and the Chief Operations Officer at Sway. We are a Bay Area-based biomaterials company that's focused on developing replacements for single-use plastics using the benevolence of seaweed. So you can think of us as a material formulator. We create recipes for resins, which is the kind of ubiquitous form factor that basically anything made of plastic is initially conceived in. And we create completely bio-based, home compostable replacements for these traditional petroleum plastics, utilizing seaweed's components.
For our resin, which is called TPC, and a low density polyethylene. And by that, I mean, think of that plastic bag that your Amazon orders coming in. These things are materials are nutrient rich and can biodegrade rapidly in a home composting or industrial composting environment.
That sounds fun. Sounds interesting. And if anybody has any questions at all as who are live listening, please type them into the chat, because I think the curiosity of those who are actually live watching and be able to ask you now, I think it'll be able to be really interesting.
Yeah.
So please line up the questions in the chat. So with that, so what I'm hearing is it's essentially can be used in a variety of use cases, but think plastic bags perhaps as an example use case.
Yeah, so bags is one form factor that the thin film can be applied to. There are other applications, such as a window on a paper container, for example. You can go on to one of our partners' websites, goenclose.com, and order Sway material as part of a boxed format. So there's all kinds of unique ways where our material can find its way.
Areas and aspirations right now is finding all the places the material can find a home. Us as to where the best options for putting our material are. So
products and services. And
sure.
We talked about the organization, we talked a bit about the product, maybe around it. Second one, perhaps a roadmap if you can announce things there.
Yeah. So the current core focus is on the commercialization.
TPC and
so Sway works in a business to business format.
The audio keeps cutting in and out.
Flows directly to brands who then work with their own networks of projects with brands with. So we have a whole
that are interested in using our material, interested in replacing some aspects of packaging within their current eco.
Publicly and within their distribution channels. So we sell the resin. These customers that are mostly within the consumer packaged goods spaces. Dry apparel or dry goods. And so getting that balance just right is tricky. And so to limit the conditions that our material is exposed to and the barrier properties required for it to perform in distribution channels, it's good we focus on apparel, for example, you know, working with someone like a small t-shirt company to package their items where moisture that would come from food packaging, for example, and packaging food contents isn't a factor. Hopefully that wasn't too much information.
No, that's great.
Okay.
And keep it coming because those specifics help give our students inspiration
Mm-hmm.
on what areas to look at. And what I'm hearing is packaging.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, would you sum it up in that way? Like TPC can be made in a variety of ways, but the main use cases would be packaging or supportive to product, the general.
Yeah. Yeah, packaging is the big focus right now. I think, down the line, in subsequent product development, we would intend to create new iterations of the resins that are focused on applications that aren't necessarily related to packaging. It could be formats of the resin that are designed for different aspects of plastic manufacturing. You could think rigids or an injection molded plastic pieces, something like the tripod that's holding up the phone that's recording me right now, or so things like that. So right now, packaging is the focus, thin film is the focus. Later on, there would be new iterations of the resin that are designed for other use cases. And I think maybe getting to the next question, even, what's most helpful for our team right now.
Before we get into that, I actually asked a couple clarifying questions. What is TPC? What's the stand for? What's the acronym for that?
Yeah. So it's a good question. So TPC, spelled capital T, capital P, capital S, E, A, is sort of an acronym. TPS, generally speaking, within plastics is thermoplastic starch. So it's a type of bio-based material, polymer, that has a specific use case, but also processing ability within the manufacturing that I've described already. Our material, TPC, utilizes seaweed as a formulation, behaves in similar ways to TPS, and so it's a little bit of a play on words.
Got it. So you invented an acronym.
That's right.
Building off of thermoplastic starch.
Mm-hmm.
And what are examples of thermoplastic starch that exists that you're innovating on?
Yeah, examples of thermoplastic starch that exist. Starches can be found in all kinds of things. Potatoes is a big one. Is a feedstock for thermoplastic starch. It's basically wherever this, without getting too detailed, this carbohydrate complex exists within certain feedstocks that you can bring that out. Our material is the stuff we're pulling out of seaweed is very different chemically, but within the processing environment performs in a similar way. And so we borrow in that sense. It's not necessarily that we're trying to replace thermoplastic starch in the areas that it finds its use case in the market currently.
But you're certainly targeting that market that exists already. You're innovating upon it.
Yeah. So, I mean, some of the examples of bio-based plastic replacements that are commonly known are PLA and to a lesser degree PHA. And so, most commonly in your day-to-day life, if you go to a restaurant or a store and you get maybe a cup from World Centric is one of the big providers of PLA. It's polylactic acid. It's probably the most commercialized and scaled bio-based, quote unquote, compostable plastic. It is one that has been exposed to a bit of greenwashing. There's problems with it. It doesn't always degrade. It's not appropriate for certain applications. And so there are folks that are using this, brands, other companies that are interested in turning over to something that more readily degrades, but then also has other benefits associated with the feedstock that it's based on, the sourcing, story of seaweed. It's a big impact narrative there. But then also the end of life, what's happening to this material if and when it degrades? Is it inert? Is it helping the compost environment? Maybe it's not. Seaweed is. It has a really beneficial nutrient profile that's additive as part of composting. And industrial composters are selling their own product, right? It's this compost that's used as a soil amendment. And so they have very specific standards and criteria in terms of what's going into the compost to make that good product.
Okay. I mean, there's a lot of students in our program that use 3D printers and they use PLA schools all the time. So I'm sure you're going to start to see some thoughts around that.
It's very cool.
That's a market you may be considering at some point. All right, next question. And again, for those who are listening live right now, please run some questions so we can ask Matt some additional bonus questions along the way. Next question is, what are your top 3 priorities at the moment for the company? This allows our students to get to know what do you care about right now. And ultimately, the next question would then kind of get into how we can derive priorities from your priorities that students can work on, that are student-centric and student-friendly in terms of the capabilities. But let's start with, what are your top 3 priorities right now?
Yeah, so I think for us, and appreciate the project scopes that the students have already put together. What's really important for us falls into 3 big pillars, and that's education, it's community, and that's conversion. And so for those who've already done research on our company, you can see that we're very active on socials. We have really great comms, great marketing. Brand is a big part of our ethos at Sway and how we think about cultivating change around the way folks think about materials in their everyday life. It's really a part of the systems change in our approach to making the impossible possible. And so, as we think about expanding that strategy, education becomes really important so far as we have best practice strategies to reach different demographics that might not resonate with the current communications and marketing that we're putting out there. There are all kinds of demographics across the United States that might be more or less disenfranchised from access to understanding materials like ours, what it really means. I mean, I've already kind of given you guys too much detail on the aspects of polymer chemistry and such. And, for the single mom with 3 kids in the Midwest, that person doesn't have time to go into the intricacies of the benefits of a certain type of polymer chemistry and what it does at its end of life. So there's certain gaps in education and the way we approach it that I think could use creative solutions, how we reach those persons, what channels we use, what the messages are, et cetera. The second part is community. So it's interrelated. It's, looking at the current Sway community, who embodies it, how can we build that out, not just within the consumer space and who we're targeting in consumer demographics, but who are the stakeholders as part of the systems change that we really need to work closely with if we're going to see the enabling environment needed to make Sway's seaweed-based solutions a reality at scale, right? When are we going to be able to see it in Walmart? What are the blockers there? There's all kinds of levels here. You know, you have the composting level at the end of life. You work your way up. It's how the brand, you know, what the municipal waste disposal infrastructure looks like across the US. And you have the brands and, you know, what the incentive structure looks like for these big corporates if they're being properly penalized for the materials that are being put out into the world. Supportive policy and legislation. Who are the folks that are supporting conversion to new materials and combating plastic waste? It's pretty complex. And so I think for a company at our stage, we have to be heads down in terms of the research and development, all the while knowing that the systems change we're trying to create involves broadening our community and being a thought leader in these spaces and with the right bodies, organizations, persons to the extent possible. So that's another area. The last piece here is on conversion. And so by that, I mean, how are we thinking about the campaigns that we're designing for the materials we're taking to the market? What needs to be part of those campaigns for them to be successful in not only convincing the brands, not only convincing the consumers, but also into taking account these aspects of policy, of legislation, of these tailwinds that are either supportive or detract from what we're trying to do. I think it's thoughtful, and maybe there isn't a best answer or a perfect answer, but it's something that I think we could see more support and creative problem solving benefiting the company.
Okay, so that's really great. Education, community conversion. Let me ask some sub questions.
Sure.
Yeah, just a little bit. For the education piece, what goes on in my brain is, how does education that Sway puts out help create systemic change? And I'm assuming the outcome that's looked for is adoption and normalcy of TP at SDA, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And maybe clarify what the outcome is of education that you're looking for, so we can inform the student participants around how might they create educational content and messaging for as close as possible to an outcome that they're looking for. How can they talk to their friends at their school, the families that they're part of, and their relatives, and start to kind of put that message out? What is the outcome looking for from them? Is it for them to advocate, you know, right now to the state of California to approve of this SA, you know, kind of mechanism of TPC? You know, is it to just get out consumer level messaging to get people to start to get it planted in the brain that seems even an option? You know, what's the outcome there? And maybe we'll pick a community conversion later, but let's start with that.
Yeah, I turn it around, Derek, and say it's all of that, and just figuring out what you've asked is really part of the prompt that we would give to students, right? It's figuring out what are the right channels for this message. What is the message? You know, for us, I think when we think about education, we think about consumers and we think about brands. They're motivated by different things. Brands, if the consumer voice is loud enough, are beholden to that voice. So just to make it really plain and simple, if consumers say we want Sway packaging for XYZ reasons, there's all kinds of associated benefits when you talk more about that. The brand is going to listen and they're going to take it seriously because, you know, suddenly there's a large portion of their target demographic, which represents a big part of their balance sheet, their bottom line, that says, you need to do this, you need to transition to new packaging, or we're not going to be there for you anymore. And so it becomes a material concern, monetary concern for these brands, turn them over. Simultaneously, there's ways that we can educate these brands on the benefits of our material, and the negative aspects of some of the materials that we're competing against, to help them better understand, this is very innovative. Seaweed packaging, this sounds crazy. I mean, it's interesting, but like, what are we really talking about here, right? And so if we can clearly communicate the benefits of our new materials that Sway's putting out to the world, it makes that conversation easier. It helps clarify for the procurement teams and the decision makers at these target CPGs why it's worth paying attention to a company like ours, and why, even if it costs a little bit more than what they're paying for now, it's going to be worth it in the short, the medium, and the long term. Figuring out what those reasons are and the best way to communicate that to those bodies is really key. And then, so far as like a kind of a grassroots thing, I think that's really interesting. I mean, there's plenty of examples out there of viral marketing campaigns and grassroots initiatives that have led to like really an upswell in certain ideas, products to really thrive, right? And so I think that's also a really interesting theory. It's like, what does that grassroots campaign look like, here locally in the Bay Area, for folks to become more aware, not only about Sway, our company, but really the change we're trying to support in terms of a materials revolution, helping more persons just rethink the way that they interact with the materials on a day-to-day basis. I think it's really important to note that at Sway, we're not trying to use seaweed to replace everything. In every single conversation we have, we exhaust the option for there to be a recyclable, a reusable, or a no package solution, right? There is not a one size fits all approach here, and that's a really important part of what underpins our endeavors, but really how we want this message to go out to folks in terms of kind of again, waking them up to the reality of the way that we're interacting with materials on a day-to-day basis now as a society, and what we can do to have a more thoughtful approach.
Great. I would love to double click on a few more of those, but like, let's move on to community.
Sure.
And get to the next question, which I think will make this more honed in. So community, just a clarifying question about community. It looks like you're looking to build a vertical stack of stakeholders from consumer grassroots, sure, to institutional, let's call it brand, company level, who would use it, like users of it,
yeah,
sure, maybe manufacturers there too, and then maybe even like institutions and governments to local governments to state governments, even federal, ultimate, right? Maybe even some kind of global, like even the UN SDGs. I was actually just in New York City at United Nations event.
Nice.
So like a United Nations adoption of a TP SEA, for SDG metric, would not be cool, right?
Yeah.
It was part of the Sustainable Development Goals. So like, I guess when you're saying community, can you be more specific? Like, who do you want to reach out to? Who do you want to be in the community? And what does community need? Are they all on a Slack somewhere? And there's just a bunch of government people. You're trying to have more events, and you want to invite people to come and hear about the science behind it. If you want to get more NSF research for it, and you want to get more like federal stakeholders involved, like who is the community? Where do they hang out with you, and how can you get them?
Yeah, so I think most important, the number one priority within community is just how can Sway build a larger, smarter, more comprehensive digital audience at a global scale, utilizing our existing channels for communications, primarily through social media, and then maybe expanding either into new social media channels or other outreach mechanisms. I think that's most important, just like generally speaking. I think within that, we're probably mostly thinking about potential consumers, but certainly persons who are just maybe already starting to rethink materials in their day-to-day life, interested parties in the mission, the ethos. Subsequently, and maybe a slightly different level, is this larger stakeholder strategy or stakeholder approach when we're thinking about the types of organizations or industries that Sway's voice needs to be heard in, and how we're interacting specifically with each of those and developing sub strategies to strengthen the ties, to understand the positions, the challenges, the opportunities for engaging with them, and really informing our thought leadership, taking into account all these perspectives, which in turn helps us solve for our strategy and our roadmap as a company. Do we put some of these policy obstacles ahead of certain product development obstacles? There's an order of operations that gets informed by that. So those are kind of that's the way I would break that down. Sorry, I messed the microphone up. I think most relevant to the student work would probably be a focus on the former, this global digital audience, building that. How can we optimize existing channels, new channels, the messaging that comes with that, and broadening our current demographic, but then how can we access smaller demographics of what are certainly potential consumers, but also just persons interested in what we're doing in the mission. We see each of those persons as a vector for maybe some of the grassroots stuff that we've already talked about.
Yeah, for lack of better words, like you want to build hype.
For lack of better words, yeah. And
Hype would then be able to get it out to, I mean, a general person is policymakers. A general person is a business owner, a general person, right? So how to get that kind of general hype, right?
Yeah, general hype. And
making viral marketing videos. I mean,
it's a totally viable solution, right? I think there's a good way to do that and a bad way. I'll leave that up to the students to judge. But we're open to all ideas there, and everyone will be able to tell already. I don't know if folks were already familiar with us through social media, but we have great presence. We do a lot of things right already. So building on that and maybe making use of channels we don't already have a presence on. I think one of the students had mentioned YouTube as part of their proposal. That's a relatively underexposed area for us. But what does it mean for TikTok? How are we going to, broaden our reach to Gen Z and making sure that we're crafting content that feels accessible to them and meets them where they're at?
Cool. And one of those students might be.
Okay.
So moving on to the conversion clarification before we actually go on to the next question. So conversion, you're talking about sales here, right? You're talking about deals. You're talking about getting the campaign to the market of these sub strategies and people who would actually piloters of the like you can get a seaweed plastic or seaweed bag deal. If you can get like a sub market Nike type of shoe company, like use it within the packaging to demonstrate. Is that kind of what you're looking for now? Conversion? Is that what you mean by conversion?
So I lean more towards the design of campaign. This is more at a grassroots level. It's like, how can we design campaigns, or how can we activate communities around which campaigns are designed to get the word out there, right? And a result of that might be some type of interaction with a brand who ultimately adopts the product, right? But I think it's the design of these, it's the conversion through campaigns, the design and execution of campaigns that converts more persons onto Sway's team and brings more folks into our corner. And I know that's kind of abstract, but I think it starts with getting, again, it always starts with getting more consumers, more just general people on board and educated and aware of what we're doing. I think there's really useful ways to engage folks. It could be through, it could be beach cleanups. It can be through working with Save the Bay and doing, cleanups on the shore. It can be through some kind of local composting workshop that, Sway is a part of, right? So how can campaigns be designed with from a grassroots perspective with certain demographics, certain communities in mind that help create more education, more awareness, and then, it might be in partnership with a local company, a local organization that could be an adopter of Sway. Who knows? But what are the creative strategies around those kinds of campaigns that help convert?
Got it. So like, for example, so those are really great examples.
Mhm.
One that came to my mind was one of our teachers in our program, Kristen Valley, Fremont Unified, has a partnership with Lowellspot, it's a retailer company. And if you had a partnership with like a Lowellspot to pilot a CV, PLA, filament campaign, right? That might bring the 3D printer industry, on board with this new material potentially, right?
What is the bot? Sorry, I'm not familiar.
Lowell's
Lowellspot.
L's go-to.
Okay.
And tons of our kids have gone through our program, like hundreds of interns. So, and they have Lowell's spots all day. She actually knows the Lowell's himself.
Oh, wow.
So like, that would be an example,
Mhm.
right? Of you're interested in the scalable campaign strategy. And not necessarily do you want your own team making those campaigns, right? You would want the community to create campaigns, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, to be clear, we have no shortage of pilot opportunities with brands directly. That is, we are not in need of that necessarily. So it's much more, it's less of a focus on how can Sway partner in an interesting way with a brand at a small scale and see that grow. It really has to be focused on community and education, right? And I think it's bonus points if it involves a like-minded organization who would be a potential customer. But I just want to make sure that distinction is clear. We have too much inbound interest currently for our production volumes, and we're about to flip the switch. But right now, it really is about how can these. It's not. I mean, part of it's public relations, part of it's marketing, part of it's communications. How can our community outreach and advocacy efforts at this stage, in the stage of a company we're at, support our go-to-market?
Great, okay, let's move on to the next question now. What can students do within these priorities of education, community, and conversion? Essentially, what's another top 3 priorities that students really can either do, but also can really help?
Yeah, so I wrote down a few things here. I hope you don't mind me just kind of listing them off. So this applies to all 3 of the buckets that I had mentioned already. So it's research on best science communication for the language, website, and social media. It's competitor landscape exercises on seaweed and as a regenerative feedstock, and helping to identify some of those benefits that can make their way into the educational materials. It's content strategy and best practice research for channels that Sway doesn't utilize to the best of its ability currently. I mentioned YouTube and TikTok. It's looking at content strategy from perspective of what stories are we missing? Looking at what we've done to date, where most of our content lies, who it appeals to, what are we missing? Who is underrepresented and why is that a material concern to Sway's content and marketing strategy? How can we develop the strategy around Gen Z and what resonates with them from the perspective of innovation and sustainability? And how do we best market materials like ours to brands seeking sustainable solutions? We have a pretty good idea of what that looks like, and it's reflected in our strategy right now, but I think fresh eyes are always better, especially those that don't sit so close to the issue right now, perhaps, and maybe are reflective of a younger generation. I think putting together case studies based off of this research and this strategy work is going to be really helpful in terms of thinking about how we're working it into what we're doing right now. And then also being thoughtful in understanding what channels we need to use and what organizations or other bodies we need to reach out to create something that's concrete and future proof.
Just want to confirm, you listed like 8 things, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Just want to confirm that. So I heard general research on the best kind of scientific communication for the language. That's one,
Mhm.
right? Number 2, kind of a competitor landscape exercise, so we can kind of analyze and bring that back into kind of promotion of the material of the PC, right? So that there's a comparison and people understand the difference in the opportunity, right?
Yeah.
Number 3 is the general kind of content strategy. And number 4 is kind of content strategy as it relates to what Sway doesn't utilize, like YouTube and TikTok, right? Specifically, there might be other ones too that students may know of, like Discord, for example, or maybe other platforms.
Yeah, totally.
Number 5, what stories are we missing? Kind of strategy, right? Like analyze what we've done already,
Mhm.
and then what works already, or who appeals to, and find out the gaps in areas that work, but there's still people that need to be reached, right? Kind of strategy.
Mhm.
And then number 6 is a strategy around just Gen Z in general with innovation and sustainability. Maybe some more keywords like that. Number 7 is how do we best market materials like us to sustainable, what's where I'm missing? How do we best market materials like us to brands as a sustainable solution?
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah, so I mean, to maybe rethink, well, what are some unique or creative ideas on how we can supplement or improve our current marketing strategy to brands who would be adopting our flexible film? I think there's room for improvement there. We're not perfect, right? And so fresh eyes could create a more compelling narrative that we put out there.
Got it. And then lastly is case studies based on this research and strategy work, all these different things, so that people can come and look at it in a bite-sized way.
Yeah, and so these things aren't all discrete. I think like there's different ways to combine these, but they should reflect some of the different themes or ways of interacting with the 3 pillars I mentioned before that I think would be useful in shaping the proposals around.
Okay, great. So that's great. That's exactly what we needed, those things, because then we can have more targeted focused scopes now, right, from those areas. So, anything else you want to add to that before we move to the next question?
I don't think so. Yeah.
And again, keep the questions coming and give the questions. So next question, we're moving towards the end here. Thanks for going over it as well. What qualities are you looking for in candidates? Don't know how many students you've worked with before. I've worked with them tons. So based on what you know of younger professionals, even as young as high school, even middle school,
Yeah,
and in college, what qualities are you looking for in candidates?
yeah. The qualities we're looking for really go hand in hand with the qualities that we would be hiring against as a startup, an early stage startup. And so hopefully this is educational so far as anyone listening has aspirations to join a company at our stage. Paramount is having a genuine passion and an interest for the mission associated with the company. So the person needs to really care about the things that Sway is involved with. Materials innovation, ocean health, seaweed, biomaterials, composting, or even a focus on it could be the things that they don't like, right? There's plastic pollution, plastic waste, landfills. That problem, that nexus needs to be compelling and interesting. It needs to be a motivation for this work. Second is resourcefulness. Everyone, there's a lot of agency provided at startups. A lot of self-motivation is required to get the job done. There's going to be more questions than answers provided to you. And so it needs to be someone who's really motivated by the challenge of answering tough questions that don't necessarily have a solvable answer, right? It's doing the best you can. It's finding the information that's going to inform the product of your scope of work that is best effort, right? Being comfortable with the ambiguity and tough problems, systemic problems, that's really key as well. Really clear written communication is also super, super important, especially when we're talking about sort of the themes here within marketing communications. The language is so key, right? So strong attention to detail and strong written communication and thoughtfulness there is really important. I think those are the three most important traits that are going to underpin this work. And yeah, that's probably what I'd say for now.
Great.
Mhm.
Okay. So we're gonna move on to the last question, and then I'm actually gonna take a little risk and try to have them actually ask the questions that they have in the chat
Okay.
directly to you, and I already have an idea there of how that would work.
Yeah.
Out. The last question is, do you have any last prompt or advice for students on how they can help the organization? Any last things that you feel like students in our community, it could be in the hundreds, it could be in the thousands, it could be in the tens of, right? But any last prompt or advice to the students on how they can help your organization?
Yeah, I mean, outside of the confines of this project.
Yeah, creative flex period, for whatever you want to share with them on how they can help you. Because what helps them is them helping real problems, right?
Yeah.
So
I mean, if it's not just Sway, although we appreciate any engagement within our community that you can provide, but for any mission-based startup climate tech company, company focused on solving societal problems, big problems, what we've talked about today is really important. It's driving community engagement, it's growing awareness, it's creating education. So engage with those companies, not just Sway, but any company that whose mission you're passionate about. Reach out to them, ask what would be most beneficial in getting the word out. These are all things that maybe we take for granted in our day-to-day lives, not just the folks listening, but everyone, right? Is the power that we have in terms of our voice and just spreading the word, right? The next meal you have with your parents or your friends or otherwise, talk about this interesting company you came across and what they're doing, right? And why it matters to you, why it matters to them, and why it matters to society as a whole. I think that type of communication is very underutilized and very underappreciated in terms of how motivating it can be for those on the receiving end. So I guess that would be my call to action.
all right, awesome. So we're going to transition into questions from the audience, and I'm actually going to have those who have asked questions in the chat to actually unmute yourself and ask your question directly to Matt. And I'll turn this camera so you can see you and your ability to speak. So the first question is from McClellan. McClellan may have two questions. I'll let him elaborate, but how does your company plan to market? It's around marketing. And then McClellan also had another question around platforms or ways to use to educate consumers. And then Hana may have a question around how many other companies do with packaging. And there may be some more questions. So McClellan, I'm going to actually have you introduce, basically share your question first. But give me 1 second. Let me get set up here. And
McKylan.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, give me 1 second. So there's going to be a little bit of a reverberation, but McCollum, go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, so my first question was, how does your company plan to market the flexible film of the Seaweed product? Because I haven't heard about this, even though I checked Instagram, it has like over 300,000 followers on it, which is really good. But I haven't heard of this company before, so I was wondering, how were you currently marketing it? And also my second question, which kind of piggybacks off that one, which was, what platforms do you currently use, or what ways do you use to like educate the customers or consumers about this product?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Should be good now. Okay.
It's frozen. Wait, hold on.
Try talking.
Okay. Trying again. Does it work? Thumbs up?
It's working right now. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's my name.
So currently,
The audio dropped again.
it's out there into the public sphere through any channels. The way that we market is directly with these brands that we're in conversation with. And again, we don't have any outbound marketing really. It's scary just because it's stuff simply up to us to say we're really interested. We've had pixel limits like they are the most full objects of our ability to work with them. And then subsequently, we're sending them directly materials that would constitute marketing assets, one pagers on the company, on the material, performance data sheets, etc. These are all things that would be marketing materials and assets that could be advertised or go out publicly. But right now, it's just through direct interaction with the potential customers. And so I think, moving forward, figuring out what we want to do in terms of a broader advertising strategy would be really compelling. Or how can we improve the marketing and the sales aspect of this conversation? There's a lot of room for creativity and improvement there, I think. In terms of the platforms and the channels we're currently using, we're big on Instagram. We also have a really big presence. I think we have a Twitter, but I'm not sure we use it that often. Really, most of the content is being driven through Instagram and LinkedIn. So, expanding out to, I mentioned YouTube and TikTok as examples of platforms we've thought about but haven't really worked to get a presence on. Those are big ones. Discord would be one as well. I think there are many other channels that we could develop strategies for to improve the size of the community overall, and that yourself or other students might be already familiar with and could provide some helpful advice on.
Okay, thank you. I believe that what I heard was that currently you're just focusing on the brands that could be potential buyers instead of the broad public right now, and that right now that the broad public would be something that you'd be looking for some of us to be doing to expand on.
Yeah, I think that's it could be a really informative way in setting us up for success, right? Moving, as we enter the market and we start to advertise, what does the advertising strategy look like? What does it look like to create content that's going to pull people in who maybe, didn't find Sway, but we're outreaching them and pulling them in. That's a process we haven't mastered yet, because again, people are just coming to us already sold on us for the most part, because of internal initiatives and motivation. So it's reaching what is the strategy to be developed so that we can reach the persons who aren't already coming to us.
Okay, yeah, I understand. Yeah, I was one who was promoting myself that I can help with the YouTube side of public broadcasting of this product and your information.
Cool. Yeah. The scope of work that you outlined was really engaging, and hopefully what I've said today can help inform how it becomes refined a little further.
Oh yeah, this helps a lot. Thank you.
And did you want to ask the other question, McKylan, or do you feel like you covered that in your last question too?
Yeah, I cut both questions were covered.
Great, thank you, McKylan. So, Hannah, would you like to ask your question earlier? Go for it.
How many companies are like using or interested in using your product right now?
It was how many?
Ask that one more question. Ask that one more time, Hannah, a little louder, please.
How many companies are using or interested in using your product?
We have our current pipeline, probably a couple hundred companies that are vetted and interested in using the product. We can't fill all of those orders just given the scale of production currently. So in the market, there are probably 10 individual companies that have piloted our material in some shape or form. And as we move into the fall, we have a cohort of roughly 10 brands that will be focused on delivering extended volumes to, basically a scaled up version of this pilot.
Okay, thank you.
Did you have any follow-up question, Hannah? And also, Divya, if you have any questions too, you can raise your hand and you can be called on. And McKylan, if you have any after Hannah too, that'd be fine too. But Hannah, any more questions from your end?
What's the goal? Like, how many companies would you want to be able to use it and to be using it?
Oh man. In the long run, as many as possible, right? It's a tough question to answer. I think in the short term, in the medium term, we're supply constrained, so it's really contingent on the volume that we're able to produce. And so for that volume that we're able to produce, what's most important is finding the companies, the brands that are most aligned with Sway, what we're trying to do, and understanding the value proposition of our material. Not only does that mean Sway is able to charge more, but there's other positive externalities because that partner is more willing to provide in-kind resources to support the company in getting off the ground, to introducing us to contacts they have that might be relevant, to partnering with us in ways that is less transactional, less off the shelf, and more focused on collaboration.
I have a question, but my hand raising feature isn't working. So can I? Okay. So, have you guys thought about expansion just out of curiosity? Like, are you big enough for that? Because I think that would help with converting people because people always want to buy products that are cheaper prices, right? But I don't know. It depends on how big you guys are.
I think I missed the first part of the question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you were planning on expanding at some point, because it seems like you guys could go big.
Oh. Yeah, we're moving as quickly as we can. So the technological readiness of our product is trailing the demand for it, right? And so the current stage is we have the resin, we have the film, it's being perfected at a manufacturing and a conversion level. So we're scaling up, getting larger and larger quantities so that we can be assured that it's going to run, because the void that we're trying to fill with our product, there's so much plastic out there. You know, one Walmart is using on a monthly basis hundreds of thousands of plastic bags, right? So the required volumes are big, and we need to work up subsequently small iterations. So it's not so much that we're waiting to expand, but we're moving as quickly as we can.
Okay, and have you thought about using something other than seaweed, or is that your main focus right now? Because I've heard of a couple of other biopolymers before.
Yeah, so that so seaweed is core to Sway and our mission, but we do formulate with other bio-based materials and bio-based feedstocks. They're part of our current formulations in TPC and TPC Flex, but you know, within the research and development, we've also mapped some interesting applications that are further along on the timeline. We're just focusing as much as possible right now on TPC and TPC Flex.
Okay, thank you.
Any last call for questions from anybody here? Okay, with that, we're going to let Matt get back to work and building capacity for more seaweed based products.
Thanks, everyone. I appreciate the questions.
Awesome. And we may also see Matt or a team member or Sway on Friday as well for the round 2 pitches potentially. So I'll look forward to that as well. That is all. Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
All right, everybody. We are closing out and we will end the call now. And appreciate everyone for being here. Thank you and talk to you all soon.